Good afternoon, everybody. This is John and Alex with another edition of the Friday Office Hours. Today is another unique offering. We started off the week, Alex and I wanted to talk about what happened with our conversation last Friday with David Amerland and how awesome it was. But there's so many synergies happening, so many interesting connections between words, between mediums, between technology, that I wanted to bridge a couple things together, like we did with Canada Gold and David Amerland. I brought in my dad, Bill Ellis, and the reason is because he's written a book called Paradigm Shift, and it's very directly tied to what David Amerland was talking about, and he even calls his book, in his book he talks about the paradigm shift in action, and I want to bring all of these together. It's going to combine business and communication and human beings and changes, and we're even going to look at business in the 70s because, believe it or not, this is all a regurgitation of things that have happened before. But there's a big change. There's one big difference, and that's the ability to communicate. The medium has changed. And so we're going to talk about all of this. But first, say hello to me and Alex. Hey, Alex. How you doing?
Hi, sorry everybody that once again we're late. This time it's not Wirecast, it's YouTube and Hangouts. I swear, I don't know, maybe we should just stop, maybe we should change the day or something. It's just we have the worst luck in the world.
I know. I think, okay, so Wirecast was part of the problem, and actually right now, based on the way I'm seeing this stream, I don't think it's looking all that good on the other end. Apologies, everyone. I'm trying to push the limits. Finally got what I was trying to do last week with David Amerland in a 4-person shot ready, but every time I go to edit the shot, it explodes Wirecast. And we are having issues with YouTube and Hangouts. Something's going on with them. We've heard rumors of other people having problems. I'm seeing it in some of the community posts. This is what we get. We can't complain, folks. We're not paying for it. So we use what we use, and this is all still emergent technology. So if we wanted it to function like billion-dollar network gear, we'd pay $1 billion for the network gear. What we're doing is broadcasting for free. All right. So, moving on. Let's talk about my dad for a second. Let's talk about this book, Alex, before we bring him in. So, he's there. He's in the green room, everybody. You're not supposed to laugh, Dad. You know how this goes, guys. So this is the picture. I took this picture of you, Dad, when we were on that walk around the neighborhood, actually.
Right.
If you had a pipe and you were holding it, I'd call this your Hunter S. Thompson profile pic. Okay. I just like the way you look here. This book that Mr. Bill Ellis wrote, called Paradigm Shift, is a story about a community. The neat thing about it is, there's truth to it, and it's happening in more than just this community, and it's happening all over the world, in small places and big places. The paradigm shift is a change in us, in how we can communicate, and we're going to look at some different quotes from Dad's book and David Amerland's book, and we're going to talk about these things. But my dad is an author, an educator, a veteran, a fantastic dad, and he's got a lot of wisdom and knowledge to offer. He's dedicated his life to public service. And he's one of the people I admire the most in this world. So I'd like to introduce everybody to Bill Ellis, my dad.
Hello.
And there he is.
How are you? Oh, there we are. Minus the hat.
Yeah, no hat for you this time, which is fine.
Okay.
But I got to say, out of all of us, I don't know what camera you bought or what you're using there, but you've got the best picture between the three of us here right now. So good job on your camera selection, Dad.
All right.
And everybody, my dad is 72, and I just got to say, for everybody out there in the elderly generation, 65 plus, that complains about technology, that is confounded by it, confused, doesn't want to adapt to it, doesn't want to learn, unlearn, and relearn. My dad just joined Google Plus this year, and we can talk about your experience later, Dad, but I just want to say there are no obstacles. It's only you, all right? Because it doesn't matter what age you are, you can get in, you can learn, you can relearn, And I'm very proud of you, Dad, for having done that. So I just had to say that.
Oh, shucks.
So what we're going to talk about here today, last week we talked with David Amerland. We had Canada Gold on. And we were talking about his book, A Google Plus Hangouts for Business. In that book, he has a quote about paradigm shift in action. What he's talking about is a change in business mentality, a shift in the ability of businesses to communicate, right? The ability for us to communicate. He's talking about it strictly for the business community. We, all of us, have been talking about it for all sorts of things. Business, the world, this communication shift, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but this communication shift is very disruptive, to use one of David's words. Would you agree?
We've had some conversations about this. I want to agree, and I think that it is making a difference. I don't think we've seen the shift yet completely. I think that it's helping us overcome, as I mentioned last Friday, the two barriers that as human beings we are most concerned with when it comes to communication. It is helping us overcome those barriers of space and time. It definitely is. But I'm not sure we have seen the shift quite yet. I'm hopeful, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be in Plus, I wouldn't be doing these, I wouldn't be a part of SEOWiSE. But I don't think that we have seen the shift yet. And there are a lot of scholars that would agree with you. They say the medium is the message. That side of the communication scholars would be like, yes, it totally matters. And then there's the other side of scholars that say the medium doesn't matter. Your communication remains the same no matter what. So even in our field alone, you would find disagreement.
Well, that figures. Damn academics.
I know. If we agreed with everybody, it would be so boring.
That is very true. Dad, I'm gonna pull up this quote from your book because it kind of starts off everything, okay? And then we'll go into David's quote, and I want your take on what Alex just said. Do you feel that we're there, not there? Here's the quote. This is from your book. Let me find it right here. I got all this lined up here. A paradigm shift is a change from one way of thinking to another. It's a revolution, a transformation, a sort of metamorphosis. It does not just happen, but rather it is driven by agents of change. And there's a reason I wanted to say that, because I think we're agents of change. I think Google, by creating Hangouts, is an agent of change. And I want to know how you feel about that in relation to communication.
I agree. That's exactly what you're doing. And that's what I've seen happen over the last 50 years. It takes people trying out new things. And that's what you and Alex are doing. And I in fact was an agent of change. I was sent into organizations to change things. And some people didn't like me for that. The people will fight change till death's door comes around. And I saw that. But you start off with this little thing, you're a little broadcasting here and showing me on the screen, and I look awful because it's slow motion. And when I do something with my face, it comes out awful. I never looked at my face quite like this, but it is really cool. My first experience on Google Plus was I commented on somebody's post from, I think it was Thailand, and then somebody commented from Germany, and then somebody from, I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm talking to people all over the world, and all I did was comment on what somebody else had said. Sitting in front of my computer screen here in Longmont, Colorado. So, yeah.
And for you, having not grown up like Alex and I did in this technology age, this information technology age, The stories you've told me about the early days of networking, they were part of what kept me fascinated about going into this. For you, being able to have a conversation like this with people around the world in real time, with video, has to be, a very paradigm shift from what your generation has been used to in terms of communication.
Well, you understand there have been people in my generation that had not made the transition from the various generations of computing.
Yeah.
I started out with computers with punch cards, believe it or not. Some of you may not know what that is, but then from there we went to second generation computing, and third generation computing was really the first database computing.
Right.
And only a few people could figure out how to make databases talk to each other. And that was mid-70s.
Right. Right.
So, and I worked with people who just could not make the change. They were still doing punch cards in their thinking.
Wow. Well, I would say that hasn't that's exists today. I mean, we see that that refusal to change, that fear of change, that dead set in our ways. Doesn't matter what you say, it's going to be this way. And I think part of the shift is that we can communicate so openly, so easily now with the masses. And there's the levels of engagement can be, one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many. It's so different that that in itself is going to force the change. It doesn't matter. All those people can sit there and complain and refuse, but at some point they're going to be so out of the picture, so obsolete, that they'll just be irrelevant.
No, that's true.
And
the biggest change for me personally came in the 80s when organizations decided that they would put a PC on everybody's desk.
right.
And so you could communicate through email. Ethernet was the first system, I believe. You could write your own stuff, edit it, send it off for printing. And so control was solely with the individual for the first time. You could do all of these functions sitting right at your desk. That was the 80s.
Yes, it was.
90s, you had the internet.
That was, and the internet in itself, to me, is a shift, a huge, huge shift, because that was the first piece of connecting the world, right? Connecting the world to information. Let's talk about, I want to read this from David Amerland. This is his quote. So I'm going to push this over here, just show you how closely tied it is with you and your book. And there's a lot in here, so I'm going to read a little bit of it. This is from David Amerland's book, Google Hangouts for Business. A paradigm shift in action. As you're reading this, a paradigm shift is taking place. People who could never travel see places they could never go to. Complex questions regarding technical issues that require documentation and many emails to resolve are sorted out in minutes. Teachers teach students remotely at next to no cost. Music artists find a global audience before they even have a label. Businesses find customers and establish trust without spending a dime on advertising. What is happening is that the promise of remote, face-to-face communication, which has been the holy grail of businesses for over half a century, is now here. The paradox is that its arrival snuck up on us unexpectedly, riding on the back of a new social network that appeared when there was little apparent need for it, and when it was presented as one of the many free features offered, rather than the main one. And what David's talking about specifically is Google Hangouts. Because Hangouts were really the first of these mass communication systems to promote the idea of engagement en masse, whereas Skype, WebEx, all of the precursors were simply video conference systems, but they were closed. They didn't encourage open engagement. Right? So reading that, Dad, or hearing that statement from David, tying it in with your statement about what a paradigm shift is and that it requires agents of change, I'd like you to speak on the agents of change you see at work right now.
let me catch up with you a minute here. A couple of weeks ago, I went to an NBA basketball game in Denver. And as soon as you walk in the door, you're bombarded with marketing.
Yes.
There are signs flashing all over the place. You can't watch the game because there's a giant scoreboard in the middle of the floor. Well, it's about 20 feet above the floor. And you find yourself watching the replay more than the actual game. There are dirigibles floating around, advertising this bank or that company or whatever. And so we're glutted with marketing that is not face-to-face. And so what you're doing is you're saying, well, here's real people who do this, who have written a book like mine or Amerland's, and this is the real deal. This is not some marketing gimmick that's invading your space so you can't even enjoy a basketball game.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. So every individual, everybody out there, whether it's a business, a brand, a person, that is recognized that it's no longer about an advertisement. It's about a conversation. Right? It's no longer about a one-way push. It's about a two-way communication. Right? That's the big change. That's everybody that's doing that. Those are agents of change. They're pioneers. They're pushing that envelope. The problem we have is that most businesses, and most individuals for that matter, are so far behind the curve, so far behind technology, this level of communication and understanding how it functions. I'm kind of with Alex in this, that we're not there yet, and I'm afraid we've got a long, hard road to go before it's adopted globally. What do you think about that?
Well, judging from my limited experience on this, the technology can do a lot of things, but people are going to have to catch up to it. And your agents of change, I guess, are going to have to be smoother, in doing this.
Yeah. So at this right now in technology, we're really struggling with understanding and adapting, even what we're doing right here. And then 5 minutes before I go on, Wirecast crashes. We're having problems with that. And so technology is one thing. Understanding how to use it is another. Feeling comfortable with it is another. But let's take a shift from these things. I knew this was going to be hard, Alex, to try to bridge all of these things together, and we're trying here.
I know we are. I think something else that you're leaving out with that is the individual. We're looking at the technological issues, and we're looking at the the flow of ideas from the agents of change to all of the other people. But what we're not considering is the unique aspect of this particular medium is that when it first started, we didn't have this face-to-face communication. It was wholly reliant on text. You had something that was protecting you from having to own up to what you're saying. So the internet, any sort of communication on the internet, studies have found over and over and over again, it has to do with trust issues. We have a lot of trust issues with this medium. So when you're going to people and you're saying, no, it's okay, just hop onto a hangout and talk to these people. It's really, really hard for people to wrap their mind around that, because the internet has become a place where we can be whoever we want to be, we can act however we want to act, and we don't have to put a face to it. So, I mean, you're looking at change, this idea of a paradigm shift. You're not only shifting the technology, you're not only shifting business, but you're shifting the way that people think. That is really hard to do.
Well said, and that is true. The understanding that we all need to be vulnerable, that it works better when we're all open and honest. That's the biggest shift that there is. And face-to-face communication, the fact that I can read your expressions, I can see when you think I've said something, or I can interpret it one way, right? that's different. We didn't have that before unless we were physically in the same place as the other person. And so,
Right. And I mean, now we're dealing with this, the idea of talking to someone millions of miles away that we've never met and talking to them on the internet. It used to be okay because we were protected. We didn't have to, we didn't have to actually get to know the person. We didn't have to actually meet the person. But now we're having to deal with this idea of not only am I going to communicate with someone that is millions of miles away that I've never met in person, but I need to find a way to trust this person enough to talk to them in a sort of face-to-face setting. I need to trust that they're not going to, totally attack me when I'm in this vulnerable position. They're not going to say how ugly I look on camera. They're not going to call me out when I have a mad expression, or we're exposing ourselves so much, and that is such a hard. I mean, even in face-to-face communication, it's a really, really hard concept to accept. So thinking about the internet in terms like that, it's just mind-blowing for a lot of people.
Yeah, agreed. I want to take that concept. I want to go back to your dad, and I want to have you explain why you wrote the book in the first place. Because I understand what it is. And I want you to explain to everybody why you wrote it, because I want to tie what happened in your book to what's going on with business. I want to tie what you laid out in the community to what's going on globally. So, give us a recap.
All right. What happened is, in the last half of the 20th century, the United States lost pretty much all of its textile manufacturing. And you could have seen this coming because textile manufacturing has always been very labor intensive, and managers have tried to figure out better ways to do it. So what happened in my hometown is they lost their textile industry. Next came the furniture industry. And for a number of decades now, that town is like a lot of southeastern United States towns, doesn't have any industry. Employment is very high. So I wanted to create my own town and show what happens to a community when everything goes bad. There's a lack of jobs. People are down, they're depressed. They don't think there's any way out of it. And they don't have any money to do anything. People are being foreclosed on. It's the worst possible thing, but it really parallels at the same time what was happening in the country. Tent cities popped up. You'd see it on the news every night, where people were leaving their homes, losing their jobs.
Right.
And so I put all of that into this little mountain village town, really. And I think, okay, so that's the problem. So how did they get out of this? So I brought back a group of people for their high school reunion. And I said, well, these are smart people, and they have energy, and they're no longer high school grads. They are now really smart people. They've had experience. And what do they bring back to this town, and how do they help the town heal itself? Because they don't heal the town heals itself. And so it's a story of really work improving from the bottom up instead of from the top down. There's no leadership until these 5 come back, and then they are the agents of change. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. It does. And I like what you said. It's particularly the part about it came from the bottom up, right? It wasn't a top-down solution. And I what I want to say there is that we have a very powerful tool now. I'll give credit to Google, but I'll basically say technology in general, with some companies leading the way like Google, have delivered a medium, an advancement in technology. We, at the grassroots, at the lowest of levels, we're the ones understanding what can be done with it. We're the ones using it to affect change. We're trying to change the people at the top that are too slow and too scared to move, too scared to change. And so I find it, I don't know, there's just something amazingly awesome about that. Something so powerful when, I won't say globally, but certainly the way I feel about the United States of America right now is that we, the people, don't have a lot of power. And this gives us a lot of ability to change that. This gives us the ability to make the change in businesses, which can make the change in government, right? Because our government is nothing more than a big business. So if we can affect change with corporations, we can affect change with government, right? And you guys know I'm not going political on this. I'm just basing it on the current status quo. We have corporations that are considered human beings and considered equal rights within our government. So we might as well affect the change with the most powerful, influential beings that we can. And I want to take that, Dad. Your story is really cool because there's a lot of conflict. They go against what you would normally do. And one of my favorite parts of that is that the young kids, right, the youth, bring in the new ideas. And they have to go with that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that part of Virginia is known for bootleg whiskey. And so I created this character who's an expert in small business startups. And he lives in a cabin making this great bootleg whiskey. But he comes down from time to time and talks to the high school seniors and talks to them about ideas and innovation and how to create new ideas. And so this guy takes the National Honor Society group of students and he challenges them to fix the town. And he says, look, he says, your parents lost their jobs, they're really depressed, but you can help them. Your parents aren't dumb, they're just really defeated right at the moment. So these kids come up with all of these ideas, and they're challenged to not only come up with the ideas, but how would they implement them? Right. There's only one problem. They don't have any money. They got all these great ideas. So I like the idea that a young generation has the knowledge and the ideas, but they need capital. And what's happened in the last 20 years is capital has gone out of the country.
Right.
It's not being reinvested. So that's what I had happen in my story. The 5 people come back, some of them have some money. So they start investing in these ideas that the younger generation have.
Well, makes sense to me. I like the fact that the older generations, or they need capital. The younger generation's got the ideas, but they need capital from the older generation. Is there anything about your story that you would consider completely idealistic compared to the way it functions today?
Yeah. One friend from back in my hometown called it a fairy tale.
For what reason? Was it the capital, the actual ability to get it?
Just that I solved all of these problems in a few pages, and everything's ideal. I have a barter system running the whole town. So if you do work in your field of expertise, and that counts for maybe an electrician visiting your house and fixing the light bulb, your electric sockets. And this happened all over the place. And I even realized that some people would say, well, this is communist, or socialist or whatnot. But it's really an agricultural community cooperating.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is what American agriculture has always done, and American families have always done in rural areas.
And somehow we've taken that concept of working together, of community, of cooperation and collaboration, and we've turned it into a dirty word, communism, socialism. We've made it sound bad, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard on planet Earth. we're human beings. We thrive as a community, not as individuals. Civilization is the concept of thriving as a community. So the idea that we're not going to help each other, that we're not going to engage, that we're not going to communicate, it's just stupid. Just dumb. But you can thank our government. What? Yes?
But it's also cultural. We have to remember that we're an individualistic culture. We don't stem from collectivism. So the thought of collectivism, many people feel threatens their individualism.
Because of political thought? You say culture. I'm curious.
Yeah, I say culture because we have individualistic cultures and we have collectivistic cultures, and they tend to communicate and they tend to think very differently. And the U.S. is the epitome of an individualistic culture. We are a culture that when we have kids, we tell them you're the best and you can do whatever you want, and it's all about you. We're not like a lot of, usually when we think of collectivistic cultures, we think of Asian cultures in which it's about the good of the collective. Both have their pros and cons. I'm just saying that as an individualistic culture, when we hear, you're going to work as a group, we're like, but I want to do it myself. It's about me. I'm the individual.
Wow. That's interesting, and it makes me wish we had changed the Constitution a long time ago. Instead of we the people, it should be you the person. You the person.
Yeah, it probably should be.
Because we the people... What? Go ahead. We have comments? Are there people actually watching?
Yeah, I have... Are there people actually watching? Yeah, it's not just us. Of course there's people watching.
Hi, people.
Annabelle Howard, who I love your new profile pic, Annabelle, says... to Bill, your book sounds like a great HBO series.
Oh my
and
God.
I couldn't agree more. And then
That's awesome.
we have Owen Ellis. You hear that, Bill Ellis? John just called you elderly.
All the time, Owen. All the time.
And finally, this is a really interesting comment from Victor of Canada Gold,
Hey, Vic.
who apparently decided to return. Hey, Victor. He says, technology is an agent of change. It's up to us to determine how we use the technology and what kind of change we want to see. I think it's interesting to think of technology as the agent of change and not the individuals using the technology.
Interesting thought, Victor. I'm going to pass that over to the elderly guy.
Oh, jeez. Well, Sonny, let me tell you, I watched a movie. A friend gave me this movie a year or so ago. It's called I Am. And in this movie, scientists have researched Darwin's ideas of how we evolve. And the scientists in the movie recognize that we are programmed, our DNA is programmed for democracy and cooperation. However, survival of the fittest is the idea that people hang on to, that we're built for competition. We need war. That's naturally part of us. And so I would recommend people, if you can get a hold of the movie and watch it, it's fascinating to see how we've shifted the interpretation of Darwin from one where it says everybody's fighting for survival to one where really we are naturally programmed for cooperation. And this movie shows case after case where that is true. It's true for humans, it's true in the animal world, and it's an idea that needs to catch hold.
Agreed.
I am not a competitive person. I like to see a good game and see good play. Period.
You just nailed the point. The competition, while there's certainly fun in competing, and I understand that, the collaboration and the outcome are really what's awesome. I mean, you raised me that way. Right? I played on teams. I enjoyed playing on the team. It was about the team and the friends that I had and the people that we played with and the Obviously, very lucky to have the coaches that we did, and you and I have talked about Coach McGraw many, many times in the past. But that's a beautiful example of somebody who's, you know, I learned a lot from that guy and from all of the parents that taught there. But the biggest lesson I learned was you're a team. Think like one, right? And let's take that and transition that into some of the stuff you were telling me about the 70s, because, you know, I was born in 70, I really don't remember all that much about it. And, you know, David Amerland is talking about business concepts today. He did an article in Forbes recently that I find kind of, I mean, it's a great article. It's fantastic. But I was really chuckling when I was reading what he was saying. And I'd heard many of the same things mirrored in your statements by books from people. You talked about the Avis guy, and I'd just like to bring that up if you could just talk about that. Tell me what up with people or whatever it was called. Tell me about the Avis book, because then I want to relate it to David's quote.
It's called Up the Organization.
There we go. Thank you.
And of all the management books I read as a grad student, I thought it was the best one because it was actually a true story. And Robert Townsend was the author, and he was the CEO of Avis. Came up with this slogan, or we try harder. We're number 2. We try harder. Of course, you weren't born yet, but that's what was going on.
All right.
Hertz was running away with the rental car business. And so what this guy did, Townsend did, was he really ran the company more democratically than you see today. He paid people under him more than he got paid. He required his managers to go out and work in the jobs that their policies actually affected. So if, for instance, if you were the vice president of marketing or maintenance of cars, once a month you had to go do that. It got the managers out of the office to work with the workers, where, surprise, surprise, they would get ideas for how better to run the company.
Imagine that.
Because a good consultant will tell you the people have the ideas. You just need to figure out how to get them.
Imagine that.
So my favorite part of Up the Organization was Townsend said there had to be a vice president for killing things.
Love that.
And
yes.
This is someone who would stand up in a board meeting and yell horseshit. That's the worst idea I've ever heard. So you would have a management who was able to accept this and hear this and take it and not fire the guy on the spot.
Right.
So that had to be open communication with these people. And there's a commercial on TV right now where a guy says, I don't like this idea, and they throw it and they fire him. They throw him out.
Right.
That's the cult of the individual at the top. That is no good.
All right. That is perfect segue. So you just talked about basically investing in your people, right? Here's David Amerland's quote. This is from a Forbes article today. How to raise the IQ of your business and why. And I'm just going to read the quote here. This is 5 marketing tools at your disposal. And he did 5 tools. I just did this snapshot of the first one. The change being experienced is one of culture, not technology. It will take a big shift in thinking to deal with it successfully. The smart companies at the forefront of this change do a number of things differently. Here are 5 ways you can join them. 1. Empower your people. When employees are seen as an integral part of the business and the way it works, they're equally invested in its marketing and the way it presents itself to the outside. This requires a substantial culture change internally, plus better communication and greater trust. I don't know. Those words pretty much mirror everything you said, Alex, everything you've said, Dad. And Dad, you were referencing a book that's 40 years old, right?
Yep.
The rest of David's points also mirror all of the other statements you've said regarding Avis, books from the 80s, and other things you've talked about regarding the concept of treating human beings equally and communicating with them openly, which seems to kind of be the gist, right?
Well, I wrote you earlier about the idea of quality circles.
Yes.
quality circles were a big deal in the 70s. And I would go into an organization and get the manager's approval to teach his people how to do quality circles, which is basically you teach the workers how to analyze their work processes and how to improve them. The only problem with that is that you could do this a lot, and then when the workers went back to management after the consultant left, management was saying, no way, I don't like that idea. Well, I wouldn't sign a contract with a manager unless he agreed to accept the ideas that his people would come up with. It wasn't exactly that he had to implement them all, but he really had to listen to them. And he had to see, well, maybe I could work it this way. But he was working with the employees who had analyzed his work processes and come up with a way to do business better.
I find it sad that you actually had to force in your contract a note that says you have to listen to what the employees said. Because you would think any intelligent business owner would want information from the people at the ground level, you know? Just to tie into that, I worked for Sam Ash for a long time. And, they did a lot of things right, a lot of things wrong. They were a growing company, and they worked really hard at figuring out how to be a big company in growth. But the one thing that they did that I thought they did better than anything was they communicated with their employees, all 2,500 of them, or however many they had at the time. And I'm talking everybody from, top management, a guy named Howie Mendelson that I talk to all the time, Jerry Ash. But Jerry Ash, CEO of Sam Ash, would talk to us in the receiving room, guys that were, the lowest of the sales guys. It just started the other day. I mean, that's the kind of level of communication between everybody at upper management. They knew the people at the stores. Granted, they only had 50 stores, but that's still a lot of people to remember, right? And when you know that you can get a call from Jerry Ash, owner of Sam Ash, and he wants to shoot the breeze and tell you about a new trombone he's got on the way, that's open, right? That was a very different company to work for, and that was my first experience in a corporate entity. I think I was very lucky in that regard. The brief time I'd spent prior to that at Guitar Center was the antithesis of that, right? It was closed. There was no communication. You did it one way. We don't want your advice. We don't want your information. We've got this down. Just do your job and shut up. That was Guitar Center. Sam Ash was the opposite. So I just had to relate those stories because at the time I wasn't thinking of them as being that different, being that open. Now I can look back and go, wow, they were quite a different company from what corporations are in general today. So, just had to bring that up. No, I don't have a finish on that. Looking for another shot. Just here,
Well, you've segued into something called management by walking around.
Please, you had mentioned that earlier. Tell us all about it, Dan.
Well, that was, there were a number of books on excellence, okay? Excellence in Management, and Tom Peters was the author of a book in the 70s and maybe early 80s, where he would go into various companies and find out how do they run them, And the managers that were the most effective were those that got out of their offices and went down and talked to the workers. So as I keep emphasizing, they did engage the workers, which sounds exactly like what David Amerland is telling you to do.
Exactly.
It's history worth repeating, okay?
Yes.
Somehow we got into this cult of the CEO as knowing everything, and they get paid $20 million a year, so they think they ought to, and they really don't.
Right. That whole concept of empowering your people, that 400 to 1 ratio of CEO salary to average employee, if that were maybe 200 to 1, just think of the benefit you get out of your employees, and you're still getting 200 to 1 ratio CEOs. I mean, really, it's a dumb business decision to pay your CEO that much money and not put money where your business matters the most, and not put money with your people. I think the conversation and our ability to have these conversations, it's going to change everything. And that's yeah, I'm going to segue into this. I'm trying to figure out how to do this, but the where I'm going with this is that David is talking about Google Plus Hangouts for Business in the sense of this is a new way for corporations to speak with customers. It's also a great way for corporations to speak with their corporations. Right? One of the things that Canada Gold is doing, School of Rock, and other companies we're working with is using Hangouts, using this new medium to talk with their company. Right? So if we can open the communication lines within the corporation using real-time video communication en masse, and we can let that process, that collaboration begin to grow, and businesses become less afraid of being open and can be more communicative with their customers, right? Which is the other part of what we're doing here, Dad. I told you about, Alex and I working on shows, but we've discovered that corporations aren't interested so much in the shows. They're more interested in the fact that they can reach out and have a conversation with a customer, and they don't have to fly around the country to do it. Right? The brand is going to call that market research, right? Or the focus group. And we're reinventing that. The focus group now can be done in a much more natural way with a lot better results. And you're doing more than just getting information out of a customer or potential customer. You're actually building a relationship. And if you do it right, you can take that customer and turn them into an evangelist for your company. And that's empowering your customers simply by agreeing to communicate with them at a level that is equal, because we can do that. And that's really what all this means. If we can change brands and customers, and we can affect change, like in your book, within a community, and in order to affect that change, we did it between the young and the old. We took new ideas and bridged them with old money. I mean, if we can do these things, and all it took was technology, that's pretty powerful, right? If technology really was the agent of change, then all we need to do is get our asses in gear. So, yeah, it's philosophical. I left you all bored out of your minds. I'm trying. I'm really trying.
I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, organizational communication is not my specialty. I avoid it like the plague. I find it really dull and boring. But one of the things that's unique about organizational communication is that you have to factor in a lot more. With individual communication, we talk a lot about trust and openness, and that's kind of what most concerns us. When we talk about organizational communication, we talk a lot more about control, because that is something that is very important to organizations. Time and time again, it has been shown that hierarchies within organizations are the way that things get done. You have a leader, even in group communication, that's just how things are. How you implement the control, the one organizational communication theory that I had to study because I was forced to, was concerted control theory. And it basically splits up control into two different kinds of control, which I think is very basic, but whatever, it works. You have concerted control, which is you set very rigid rules that everybody follows. It's considered very authoritarian. And then you have, the opposite side, where it's more of a peer-led group communication, where you're really relying on identification with the company to maintain control within the company. But I mean, when we're talking about organizational communication and we're talking about communication with customers, I'd like to think that the two are related. I can't say, because again, I don't do organizational communication research, but I think it is something that we have to think about when we're talking about organizational communication. It's that a lot of these CEOs and a lot of management, their concern is control. And obviously the older methods of control are conservative. You have these rules, you follow these rules, we videotape you, we make sure that you do what we ask you to do. If you don't, we fire you. That's a very old style system. And moving into this openness, again, it's just a different kind of fear.
I don't disagree with you at all. I just think that because the customer is demanding it, the business is going to have to follow suit. And
I got an idea.
yeah, Dad.
I refuse anymore to do an online market survey. I get these receipts at the store, and it says, log on here and tell us what you think of our service.
Yeah.
And so when you try to do that, you find out, first of all, there's probably 10 sites that duplicate the site that you're supposed to go to. And then you're asked for all of this personal background. You know, who was your football coach in high school? Where did you go to school? What did you major in? What's your health like? How old are you? How much money do you make? All I want to do is tell them their product sucks or I like the product.
Right.
One or the other. And the people at the store were very nice. But these surveys go on and on and on. So what if you're in the store, you buy something, and the guy said, by the way, our marketing person in XYZ would like to talk to you. Would you mind telling him what you think of this product? And instead of doing it, going through all of this internet research to find out where to, oh geez, yeah, Mike.
It's all right, no phone. Thanks for getting the phone, Joan. Appreciate it.
So, my wife will get it. So you got what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to do these surveys.
Exactly. And they're unnatural, Dad. They're unnatural. You're getting responses that nobody wants to put in, and if you're giving them incentive, you're kind of ruining the data anyway, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Those are all intrusive. That's exactly what we're talking about. Customers don't want to do that anymore. That's, you know, if you want information out of me, let's have a conversation, just like you said. And the fight that I'm hearing, and I find this very interesting, the fight that I'm hearing from the business side of things, from the market research side of things, is they don't know how to do a focus group that way. They don't know how to write the questions. They don't know how to formulate the focus group. I was told, and this is a serious issue. We're trying to figure this out. I was told I don't know how to do a focus group in 45 minutes. That's too short of a time. Now, I've never been a part of a focus group. But, my God, if you wanted my time more than 45 minutes, you better be paying me. And if you're paying me, I'm going to say whatever you want me to say. So what's the point? You know? I like the what you just said, Dad. Hey, why don't you tell us what you think? Well, consumers, we've been saying that's what we want to do for a long time. And now we can. Right? This new medium allows for that to happen. Alex, I totally understand where you're coming from. I just think that the consumer has the power in the end, because if the business wants to stay in business, they'll reach out and start talking. Right? It may take
Sure.
it may take it may take a long time, but I hope it changes.
I hope so too. There are many businesses today that don't do that, and they remain successful. So I hope you end up being right.
Well, I mean,
We're not going to argue about this, though. Let's go to a comment from Annabelle Howard.
okay.
Annabelle says there, and I totally agree with her before I say this, there are a few teachers who are asking their students to assess each lesson they give. In this way, the kids feel they are heard, the teachers see what the kids got and didn't get, and teachers are reminded of what constant criticism feels like. Constructive criticism becomes appreciated, and a cooperative culture evolves. And then Johnny S, maybe he says it like that, Johnny S, adds, it is a teacher's choice to go through the motions or to give that effort to teach.
Okay. I would agree that it's a teacher's choice to go through those motions and give that effort to teach. However, it could be something that could become policy. And I think that's where you're talking about it, Alex, in terms of organization, right? I mean, you got to have rules. You got to have structure. If it
You do in a sense, but I mean I do agree with Johnny in a sense in that A lot of teachers find things that work and we get comfortable with it, and so we stick with it because there are so many other things that teachers have to worry about and care about that sometimes we just, we're like, well, this lesson plan worked last term, I'm just going to use it this term. And it's really easy to get into the habit of doing that. And really, the only for K through 12, it's different. I think they have faculty reviews, but in college, I really only have to worry about if I really didn't care about my students. The only time that they ever assess me is at the very end of the term, which is it's kind of stupid because whatever changes I could implement, I would implement for the next batch of students. I wouldn't implement for them, so they would get nothing out of their feedback. So we're finding that a lot of students just rush through those because they want to leave class 10 minutes early. They don't actually give us feedback. Whereas if you do it, if you take the personal time, if you take the time out of your lesson plan to sit down and ask students, what did you learn? What didn't you learn? What should we go over? How is my teaching style helping you? How isn't it helping you? They respond a lot better to that because they can see the value in it. So I think it's a lot like Bill was saying, he's going through all of these steps online and he's not seeing the value. He's like, I just want to give my review. I want to give them what they asked me for because the value of that is that the product will be improved for him. Whereas going through all of these steps with a computer program rather than an actual individual, he's like, I don't see the value of telling you who my high school football coach was. That doesn't do anything for me. That doesn't do anything for my review, So I think that's kind of the connection that we should see there.
Well, you nailed it. I agree with you 100%. The value coming back is what the consumer's asking for. It's like, great, you're giving me a survey, and if I take it and fill out all this bullshit, you're going to give me $1 off my next burger. Yay! Not enough. Not what I want. All right? And this information you're asking me to get in, way too much of a pain in the ass. Too much of my time. You're asking more than I'm willing to give, and your payment is not enough. That's basically what's happening there. And it's funny that we ran into a wall with that with businesses that said, look, the way you do focus groups is you pay them, you offer them an incentive, you give them money. When we told them that we could get conversations happening with customers online and that they actually happen all the time and have been happening for a while in Hangouts, because they want the opportunity to give feedback. They don't want to get paid. The incentive is the opportunity to be heard. But they need to have the opportunity to be heard in an experience where they feel like it's being validated, not just pissed into the wind. And I see that with what you said in the teachers. And what Annabelle said about teachers doing that. Doing it in real time with your students, asking them, how was that lesson? What do you think we could do to improve? I think is a fantastic idea. I think it's idealistic with our current education system. I don't think there's the resources, the time, or the budgets for any of them to do it. And considering our current education system is only focused on numbers and not about the quality of the education, we've got a long way to go in that regard.
Well, yeah, I agree. Again, who does the burden fall on, as always? The teacher. And we don't get anything extra out of it except for for me at the end of the term, I have students coming up to me and saying that they really enjoyed my class and that it was their favorite class. And for now, that's enough to keep me going. That's enough to keep me innovating. That's enough to keep me changing what I do with my students. But I can imagine doing it for 10 years and completely exhausting myself, continuing to try to change things, to try to stay innovative, and I have all of this other stuff that I have to take care of because I'm a teacher and I work for the government. Yeah, I can see why it would get exhausting and I would stop trying.
Agreed. And I think to wrap it up here, the medium, the technology, has given us maybe the ability to do this a lot easier. Right? Because you can use this to bring people back together. You can use this to make that conversation better. This medium makes it easier for teachers, businesses, everybody to communicate. We're still trying to figure out how to do that best. We're just trying to figure out the balance and compromise between the control and the openness. But the change is happening. The shift is happening. I wanna read one last quote that I pulled up here, Dad, from the back of your book. It's actually in the author's notes. I just love this. I'm certain there are people in small cities and towns across the country creating paradigm shifts every day. Folks are not waiting for government or corporate management to act. History shows that paradigm shifts are unlikely to come from those at the top. That is such a poignant statement because we know for a fact they don't, and they aren't, and they haven't. Right? And
I wasn't asleep, I heard.
No, I know.
So where do you start? Do you start teaching managers in grad school or whatever? But they need to understand that they need the knowledge and information from the people at the bottom. If you want to say that the people are the bottom, they're actually the top.
Interesting way to look at it. We're the ones who have the control at this point. We have to take it and do something with it.
Unfortunately, a lot of people don't believe that anymore.
I know.
And that's politics.
Well, that's what you're talking about, and you've heard me say that a bunch before. But I'd have to say I'll recant at this point. You know how I feel about our government. You know how I feel about the state of things in this country, and I really do feel like through our political system, our democracy is broken. Our voting is broken. That's not going to work. But we can affect change with this medium on the web, globally, and in our communities, and we can affect the change to businesses, and they can affect the change to corporations, and that actually affects the change in the White House because it's owned by corporations. So we can make this change happen. We just can't start with the government. We have to start right here with this. And your book is a beautiful example of that happening in a community. David Amerland's book is a manual for how businesses can start doing it right now. That's why this all comes together. That's how this all ties in together. I might not have done a great job of bringing it together, but it does come together, believe it or not. So, Alex, do you want to... What, Dad? Yeah?
I was just going to say, it sounds to me like you don't need to reinvent everything in order to use David Amerland's ideas.
No.
Those have been used in the past successfully. You just now have the communication ability to go even farther.
Yeah, and you know, the first part of David's book talks about the how and the why. The second part is really the technical implementation of a hangout, right? Explaining how it works. How do you do this? Right? But the bottom line is the ideas, as we've shown from your talking points about the books read in the 70s and the 80s, they're not new ideas. We're applying them in a different way because we have technology to apply them differently.
Right.
It's fantastic. Alex, you want to add anything onto this with the communication connection?
No, I think I've added my communication piece enough today, and I should run really soon because I have another HOA that I have to jump onto.
All right. Well, then we will end it. Thank you, everybody who joined us today. I know we were going to bring people on, and one of these days, Alex, will get the technology right to do that beyond what we did here today. Annabelle and I don't know who all else. Victor and you name all the people. Who else? Who else?
Annabelle, Victor, Owen Ellis stopped by. Johnny S. is a new one. So we had a couple people checked in that I didn't see comments from, but those of you, please drop a note, say hi, so that next time I can recognize that you were here and you exist.
Thank you all, and for myself and Alex and Bill Ellis, both books are available at Amazon. Paradigm Shift by Bill Ellis, Amazon.com, and Google Plus Hangouts for Business by David Amerland. Get them both, read them both. You'll get a wonderful story about change that's happening, and you'll get the manual to do it for your own personal brand or your business. And we'll see you next Friday. I'm not sure what we've got going on, but I'm sure we'll be here. We'll interview somebody. And this has been the Friday edition. You guys have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.